Well, you have finally got here. You are listening to the Erskin Music Podcast. Here, by popular demand, we discuss life, culture, Christ, and of course, music. These half-hour broadcasts are perfect for a commute, coffee time, chat, or any other gap in your schedule where you want to put great content. So without further ado, let's join the conversation today, already in progress.
All right, this is how you know you have a really big episode on the way. I don't even have time for the introduction as we normally give it. I just got to start the show. Marriage is what brings us together. All right, this is Nick Frietas. I don't know if there's going to be some ads or things that pop in here, and so I'll have to have my finger on the volume button there. Kill it! Get those ads off of there. But Nick Frietas is talking about his experience. Oh, yeah, effective communication, that's important. And I love the way his intro begins here because he kind of gives a little bit of a backstory of something that I wanted to talk to you guys about today. And that is most everybody I know. In fact, I don't think I know anybody that is not from a dysfunctional, in some category, family. And so once it reaches a certain critical mass, and I think that it probably has in our American context, once we reach a critical mass, everybody, that means everybody just with slang, is from a dysfunctional family of some sort. And so I'm happy to join the ranks of dysfunctional family, trying to do the best that we can to not damage our kids, but, you know, nonetheless, their parents are nincompoops who have been saved by the grace of God. So Nick Frietas is talking about where it is that he came from, and certainly with the level of divorce that we have in our culture, and just, you know, sometimes people not even getting married, and just all different manner of dysfunction that's going on in our society. Nick Frietas, I think, is onto something there when he's able to tell people there are some solidifying factors that I think we need to take into consideration, and we need to speak more about these things and talk more about these things. And so he's going to tell his stories, but look, I've been married for 21 years myself. I got receipts as well. And so I have not approved this episode with my wife, but I'm sure, knowing her for 21 years, there's nothing that I'm going to say here in the next few moments that is going to upset the apple cart, not in my home. And if it does, I'm on a plane overseas. So anyway, here's Nick Frietas talking to us about some marriage things in his context. If this is your context or anything like this, be encouraged today about what it is that he has to say.
And some people tell me that I just got lucky with respect to who I married because, after all, I grew up in a broken home. My wife grew up in a broken home. I was 19 when I got married. We immediately went into a profession where the infidelity and divorce rates are incredibly high. Out of the first 10 years of our marriage, I spent about 50% of it away from home. We went through several moves, which is considered one of the more stressful things on a marriage. Yes. By the way, the other stressful thing on a marriage is financial issues, and we had them, especially the first few years of our marriage. And yeah.
He's speaking facts. Dolphins, this is where I need you guys. Where are the Dolphins? Oh, the Dolphins should be under us. I shouldn't look up and then do a dolphin sound. That's referentially incoherent.
Yet, 25 years later, we're still in love. We're still married. We have 3 kids who so far are doing really, really good. One of them is now married. One of them is about to leave the house as they just graduated. And the other is on track to accomplish her goals, both educationally and occupationally. So
right on.
Here's the real question. How does that work? Right? Because when you get married at 19 and you go into an environment where all those problems exist, and you came from a background where, let's just say, the ideal marital relationships were not modeled for you, it seems like you should have failed. I mean, we literally had people at our wedding betting on whether or not we'd get divorced. In fact, some of them were just betting on how long it would take. And crazy enough, they're now divorced and we're still married and going strong.
Before you were interesting. Like I said, there's ads up in this thing. I can't edit out the ads, but it'll only be here for just a few moments. 3, 2, 1. Get that thing off of there.
It wasn't luck. Anybody that
I'm going to say some things on this particular episode. You'll want to pay particular attention to what it is that I have to say here, because he I don't think he goes into this so much in this broadcast, but it's one that I've talked to a lot with my friends. And I don't know that this comment is necessarily appropriate for small children. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of moments, if you have small children or if you're around small children, to maybe hide them. But eventually you'll want to talk to the kids about this. I'm just going to be candid about something that I have to say here, because it has become a point in several discussions that I've had with young men recently. And so let me give you a little, should we do a little count now? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, the kids are gone. Nick Frietas, by his admission there and testimony, got married when he was 19 years old. Beyond making a case for, and I think that I could probably make a case for being, obviously, not waiting into your 30s and 40s before you get married, or just delaying marriage indefinitely. We certainly want to make a case for younger marriage. But I think that even like 19, you're technically in our society an adult. There's a lot of things, especially men, your cerebral cortex is not fully formed itself until the age of 23. Insurance knows that. Other people know that. Your own family knows that. But I will say this. If he was married when he was 19 and did not have a long history of voyeurism, pornographic use, experiential relationships with a variety of women or multiple women, then he goes in at 19 in his marriage with no other reference points of evil. Now, obviously, your mind can concoct things. There's lust. There's all those different things in which your mind is, viewing certain things and thinking certain things. And certainly, we would talk about the dangers of that and the sin that can result from that. But I will say something that happened, I believe, in his marriage that also happened in my marriage, and that I would say is a key cornerstone. And not everybody has this experience, but I think that it makes me look a little less crazy, because when I got to college, I played college basketball, as many of you know, East Tennessee State University. Go Bucks! There we go, baby. We're gonna get it done this year. SoCon champs. Went to the finals last year. I'm expecting great things this year. But nonetheless, being a student athlete there, and then having let's just call it unfettered access at times to women, young women, I did not take advantage of those things because I felt like it was important to not do those things before you were married. Now, that's contrary to the advice that I received, or the experience that I saw, or the context that I was raised in, and much to the chagrin of the other student athletes who were on the team more immediately. They thought either he's a homosexual, first copyright strike, or there's something critically wrong with Johnson, another copyright strike, or there's any number of excuses as to why he is not having sexual relationships with the young ladies who would be happy to have sexual relationships with him. And at the bottom of that list, although this was my main contention, is that the Lord gives me a certain standard by way to live. And although I'm not married, I want to perhaps, at that time, I actually didn't want to be married. But if I ever was married, it was going to be a situation in which I didn't want all these other experiences clouding my marriage. And I will say, and he doesn't say this in this, but I just wanted to offer this up as a suggestion here. Maybe, and there's a variety of reasons why, but maybe when people were mocking me for my virginity, and maybe you, if you're out there, people are mocking you or saying all sorts of rude and inappropriate things about you because of your virginity. I'm not trying to start purity movement number 2. Let's go, Joshua Harris. Kiss dating goodbye. Here we go. Revidivus. But what I am simply saying is that when you move into marriage without a variety of sexual experiences and sexual encounters, you are able to move into your marriage in such a way that it allows you and your wife to develop a relationship that is not based on other experimental things that you've done. And so I literally, the enjoyment that I have in my marriage with my wife in the godly confines of marriage is something that I've enjoyed to the degree of there's no other comparison. What would you compare this to? Now, obviously, being a young man and being full of vim and vigor, and I hope the kids are far, far away. But there was a period of masturbation in my life in which that experience doesn't even rank in relationship to the marriage relationship. I just didn't know what sexuality was. And I think back many years now, being married for over 20 years, and if that's something that you do, the Lord can give you freedom from that, just like He gave me freedom for that. But please, my friend, recognize that that does not even compare to the confines of the marital relationship as God has established it. I want to come out and say this today. Before Nick Frietas gets going here, I'm gonna go ahead and let Erskin get going here on this situation and just simply say that is a level below zero substitute. So if one thinks that, okay, we can just do that as opposed to being married, or we can just do any number of voyeuristic things that are out there, AI, or all these different experimental things that are out there, ecstasy, all the things that are out there, instead of being married and having an actual genuine marriage relationship, you are, sadly, my friend, you a fool.
You are a huge nerd.
You are a huge nerd, according to my sound effect there.
Well, that certainly gives a sense of why people enjoy this show. Very engaging, very heartfelt. We will return to the conversation in a few moments, but first, let's thank our sponsors and you for all your awesome support. Moody Radio's Dawn and Steve Morning Show, Life Action Ministries, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and Holt International. Thanks so much to our partners who make such a difference.
Thanks, Jason. This is Dawn.
And this is Steve of Dawn and Steve in the Morning on Moody Radio. You can find us online at donandsteve.org, or you can listen through the Moody Radio app.
And as friends of the Erskin Music Show, we always enjoy the variety of topics our friend has on his show.
So, on behalf of our show, thanks, Erskin, for bringing great Christ-centered topics to the people.
All right, let's get back to the show. This is where it gets good.
You are a huge nerd, according to my sound effect there. And so I just want to make sure that I was clear about saying that, because I find, interestingly enough, that this is a conversation that I've been having with young men. Either the idea of masturbation and like, look, that's the thing that we should be doing, and delaying marriage and delaying relationships, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, as a result of that, and finding fulfillment and enjoyment. No, that's not it. Or coming into the marriage relationship and then struggling because there's this sort of comparative nature of, well, this was this experience and this was this experience, and maybe I'm not having that experience in my marriage, and so therefore there's something wrong with my marriage. I just want to absolve you of any of those difficulties and just simply say, my friend, God has given us a pattern for delaying sexual union until the time of marriage. And He was very wise in doing so. And so if Nick Frietas was married when he was 19 years old, I would imagine it's to some degree, I know he doesn't go into it here, but next time he comes on the show, if he ever comes on the show, we'll ask him. You don't have a lot of things to compare, or maybe anything or anybody to compare your wife to in that very critical and supremely rewarding area. And I think, friends, more than anybody really wants to talk about, and hopefully that didn't get uncomfortable for you, but more than anybody really wants to talk about, that is one of the key things that I've recently heard people talk about in the context of their marriage that is hampering them from having a quality marriage. And it is the comparative game that is there, the voyeurism, the experiences that you've had outside of your marriage or before your marriage, hopefully not during your marriage, friend. we already far gone if this is going on during your marriage. But I think that that's a huge thing that doesn't get talked about a lot, or at least enough. And I wanted to submit that by virtue of, I approve this ad from the Erskin Music Show, from my heart to your heart, just simply say, have no other sexual partners before your wife. And that will go a long way into keeping that in a fulfilling situation. Now, there's some other things that he's going to talk about here that he talks about that, this is why he's on here, not me. But let's get to it here today.
that tells you that's luck is probably full of crap or just engaging in cope for their own failed relationships. The bottom line is there's actually some pretty simple rules to follow that will help you ensure that your marriage lasts. It's not a guarantee. Things can still go wrong. Bad things can happen. But I don't know. Take it from someone that's 25 years into this and really happy in my marriage. It's absolutely possible. So here's 5 things to consider. 21. All right, the number one thing is shared values. Now, there's a lot of other categories within a marriage that are important, right? Goals, interest, attraction, right? All that's important. I'm going to talk about all of it. The reason why I say values are the most important is because it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. You can have all the shared interests and all the physical attraction in the world, but if you guys have completely different ways of viewing the world, of concepts of right and wrong, or concepts of truth, you're going to have some real problems. I guarantee you the first time you get into some sort of argument, and you will, if all of a sudden you find that the person that you're arguing with doesn't believe in objective truth, there's just your truth or my truth. What you're going to find is that they want to evade facts and reality whenever it suits them in order to get what they want. So ensuring that both of you have a firm foundation and shared values is absolutely critical, right? So for my wife and I, it was very simple. We shared the same faith. Now, what does that mean? It means there was a standard for objective truth, objective morality, and certain roles and responsibilities that each of us would play within our marriage. And what that meant is that if I violated those rules, I couldn't just dismiss them because I felt like it, or I couldn't just say, well, I'm the man of the house, so we're going to do it this way. She could appeal to those values in order to bring correction for me. I could do the same thing for her. It was a two-way street. This is really important because you got a lot of guys that'll tell you things like, well, happy wife, happy life. Just don't argue with your wife. She's always right. No, she isn't. And I'm going to get to that a little bit later as well. But understand that if you don't both have some sort of shared value system, which is objective and exists outside of the marriage, that both of you can appeal to in times of frustration or decision-making or whatnot,
he's speaking fast.
You're going to find out really quick that you end up just fighting about competing interests or opinions or points of view, as opposed to trying to get to something that's true and concrete. So having that is not some sort of a oppressive way to control your marriage. Having that is actually a very freeing thing, because when you have those shared values, when you are committed to one another, when you believe that marriage is supposed to be for life, and you're both committed to that belief, what ends up happening is that you're able to have real conversations. You're able to actually work through things in ways that might cause a different marriage to completely break apart.
All right. We said a lot. Woo, jump in that comment section today, my friends. Erskin Music Show straight to the moon. I would imagine that if you were watching this at this point, whether you were watching it in the time frame that normally comes in around 9 o'clock Central Standard Time in the United States of America, or if you're watching this in delay or watching this in the evening at some point, you are recognizing the beauty of what it is that he just said. My wife and I met when we were at Southwestern Theological Baptist Seminary, the seminary on the hill in Fort Worth. And our appealed shared value was the Bible. As she was studying to achieve her degree, a Master's of Divinity, in which she did, and made far better grades than I did. And then ultimately, I was preparing to get my mind right and eventually received my Master's of Divinity. Our shared value was the Lord. Now, you may hear me say this on this show, and I know that I consider the fact that I could be wrong. I'm going to go ahead and say that now. But I just don't know how I'm wrong. I've never had anybody show me exactly how this works, that I'm wrong, because I think that I'm right. I think that the exception clauses that people give for divorce, and I've obviously studied this, I didn't just come by this today, have been augmented to fit our culture more than they do the original culture of the Bible. And so whenever I'm doing Bible study and creating what is a hermeneutical bridge, I start with the culture of the Bible and I talk about what is going on here in the culture of the Bible, what is most probably the circumstance that Jesus or the apostles or God himself as he's speaking is responding to, and then therefore what the meaning and the message is, so that I can apply that to our situation, maybe find common situations or find the biblical principle that is there to help us to interpret the Bible. Why do I say that? Because on the subject matter of divorce and remarriage, one in which has impacted numerous friends of mine and will continue to impact numerous friends of mine, because I'm still meeting people that have gone through and been divorced before. Now, let me say with all the compassion that I can muster in my heart, some of my dearest friends have been divorced and remarried. This is not a continual pointing the finger at them and saying, look, you're perpetually living in sin, but it is an acknowledgement of the fact that I believe that given the contextual study and the background usage of the word moikia and porneia in the Bible, that there's no permission given whatsoever, certainly for a Christian to divorce, but the divorce is wrong, and that divorce and then remarriage is ultimately also wrong. I believe the Bible teaches very clearly, and I don't think there's as much disagreement on this, that you marry someone only in the Lord. Paul is wise in saying that, but overarching all of that, God is wise in saying that, because why? There's a shared value and shared common appeal to the God of the Bible who hates divorce. And so even as I say that today, there might be some people who say, well, what about the situation of adultery? I think that was taken care of in Jesus' statement in Matthew chapter 19. That's a whole nother day or series that I would teach on, to talk about how the disciples understood the context of what it was that he was saying there. And it was completely different than the way that we use it today. And the word in Greek is different. I digress. I say that simply to say that as you get into conversations like he's talking about there, where there's disagreement, we always and have always understood that no matter how far out, and there have been some really big things even recently in the last few years that we've been almost on opposite sides of the spectrum on, our common appeal has always been there is no divorce, no remarriage. That has been my point of contention. That has been my point of study. That has been my point of reference. And so we're never going to go into a discussion with any form of communication that has us leaving the disagreement and saying divorce is an option. This is not going to happen. Even if you take the exception clause, and I'm not trying to say people who take the exception clauses don't believe that there's no way out of divorce or out of a marriage. It's a little bit more circuitous route there, but I still respect that viewpoint. I can see where people get there, but I'm just not there. So having that shared value means every discussion, any place that we go, we are going to remain in the marriage at the end of the day. Even if we're on opposite sides of the globe, we're going to be on opposite sides of the globe in the marriage, figuring out how to bring us to a center point. And I think that he's on to something when he talks about shared values. You have to start with some shared values. And one of the big shared values, and I just drop this like it's Alka-Seltzer in water, let it fizz up in your own life. But if, I'll turn it on me. So it doesn't seem like I'm just so at you, like I'm like in your face, sucker. I'm going to say that if my daughter met someone whom that she introduced to me, someone meets her or she meets someone, and that someone says, why, you're a wonderful young lady. Of course she is. First acknowledgement of the fact that you actually have a brain. You are a wonderful young and beautiful and godly young lady. And my daughter says to this young man, oh yeah, young man, thank you for your compliment. Thank you for your acknowledgement. Humbly receive it. And this young man says, I would really like to get to know you better. That's funny that you should say that, because young man, I know somebody who really wants to meet you. If that is your ardent desire, you need to understand that you need to go meet this man. Who is this man? Is it the man on the Erskin? No, it's not the man on the Erskin Music Show. They are not introducing, my daughter's not introducing any young man to the man on the Erskin Music Show. She's going to introduce that young man to her dad. Now, I'm not your daddy. Breaking news. Can we get breaking news on this show? StreamYard, will you allow the use of breaking news? Breaking news today, I'm not your daddy.
Well, you probably already know that when you hear that sound, there's music on the way. After all, this is kind of a music show. Sit back and enjoy. All the music can be easily found on your favorite digital distribution channels. Turn up the volume and here we go.
And this is how ridiculous stuff starts. But we'll be back in just a few moments.
running from it. How did I last the day when you found me running into a greater light? I was blind when I found my sight. Oh, I tried changing the way I was thinking, but I couldn't do it alone. The gospel gave me a reason for living a new life in Jesus alone. Now it's changing, oh it's changing, it's changing everything. My resurrection feels like I'm running free. Life is so different than what it used to be. Testify, rescued. I'm never going back, not defined by a broken past. Oh, I tried changing the way I was thinking, but I couldn't do it alone. The gospel gave me a reason for living a new life in Jesus alone. Now it's changing, oh it's changing, it's changing everything. Anything is possible with Jesus in my life. There's nothing more incredible than God so loved the world. Oh, the gospel gave me a reason for living a new life in Jesus alone. I tried changing the way I was thinking, but I couldn't do it alone. The gospel gave me a reason for living a new life in Jesus alone. Now it's changing, oh it's changing, yeah it's changing, oh now it's changing everything.
All right, I'm not your daddy, so you just need to understand when Daddy Tone comes out and Daddy comes out, there's a different conversation that we're having. And so she introduces young man to me and then so on and so forth. But I say all that to simply say, if it is found out from Daddy, this is a young man who doesn't want to have kids. That's interesting. What's wrong with you? You need to get your mind right. You need to be discipled. Maybe your daddy needs to disciple you. Maybe you don't know the Lord. Maybe you don't know that children are a blessing of the Lord. Maybe there's something we need to know. But if it is like, hey, I am never having kids, and my daughter says she wants to have 5 kids, 6 kids. I don't know how many kids she wants to have, but it's more than 2, more than 3. At this point, at least it's a desire of hers as a mother. Those are irreconcilable situations there. And so there's no reason for you to continue the relationship until said category changes in your life. And I think that there's so many people who have gone into marriage without the categories in place, and then they run into a category that's an irreconcilable difference. At least that's what they say. I think even that should be reconciled. And if you're in the marriage, you should stay in the marriage and try to figure things out in the marriage. I'm not saying there's a permission for divorce, but I'm just saying there's a permission for, listen, I'm a jerk. I am. I'm a jerk. I will tell you straight to your face. And I find I have this conversation with young people, primarily, things that your daddy should have told you. I'm like, dang. Actually, that's probably not the word that I say, but I'm not going to say it on this show because there are sometimes kids who watch. Dang. Did your daddy never teach you? Blah, 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 blah. Dang. How did you get that one by the pastor? When you ask so-and-so pastor to marry you, did they just not ask you any questions except for what time do I show up and how do I officiate the service? Because there are some sucker pastors out there who do that sort of thing. If you were to ask me, to officiate a wedding for you, oh, there's going to be some counseling. Oh, there's going to be some conversation. Oh, I'm going to know that I know as much as I can know that there are some categories in which you guys are on the same page. Certainly before the Lord, before you make this covenant in front of other people. Dang, did nobody tell you that this was going to be an issue? And we're not going to be able to watch all this today, obviously. I ran out of time already. We didn't even get through all the things, but I'm going to get through the things real quick. There's a little part on this a little bit later on where he says they run into some conflict and they're having a discussion about things. He's like, man, this lady she's just straight crazy. Look, guys, I'm going to give you some advice. More breaking news. Craziness does not just start after you get married. Oh, no, my friend. Why did the Erskin Music Show discontinue? I think it's because he went overseas. No, friends, the reason why the Erskin Music Show was discontinued and canceled by every network and every platform that was out there is because of this comment that I'm about to say. Craziness started a long time ago, but you were too fooled to recognize you had crazy on your hands. And so then you got married and then you tried to figure out what was going on, but you realized crazy is happening all the time in your life. Now, why is it happening all the time? Because you didn't ask the right questions or have the right survey or have the right perspective when you were actually dating or courting or whatever you want to call it out there. The lady was crazy when you started dating her. She just looked good. She had a good booty. Whatever it was that you liked that without going into the actual introspective questions in yourself and then asking deep and penetrating questions about her life and her character before you got married. So then you got married and then she started turning crazy, but she didn't start turning crazy. She always had little snippets of crazy that was out there, And then craziness happened in your marriage and you're like, hey, I got to get out of this marriage. No, son, you ain't getting out of the marriage. You're just going to have to deal with crazy now. Your wife will look crazy.
We have come to the end of this episode. Don't miss a final word from Erskin.
Hey guys, tell your friends about this show. And as always, I look forward to your interactions. Please contact us as you are able. We love to hear from you. Okay, friends, let's go and make a difference.